look at the CUD part of the CRUD acronym and practice through that. You saw some examples of creating, updating, and deleting on your introductory video, but let's do some practicing together. Let's create a whole new database that can hold actors and movies. And with Workbench, you can create a database and all of its tables with a forward engineering to take an entity relationship diagram and make that into a database. This is how we will usually create a database in this course. It is a simpler way of creating a database, especially since we don't go that in depth with the create, up, delete. But for today, let's just look at a few SQL commands that will do it for us, even without an ERD to start with. We aren't going to keep this database. In fact, we're going to be deleting it at the end of our practice, so don't stress about getting it perfect during the practice. We're going to call the database MDB for movie database. To create the database, we'll use the create database keywords followed by the name of the database. I'll run that and refresh. If we refresh our schema list, we'll see that we have a new database shows up on our list called MDB, but there are no tables in the database yet. It's just an empty database. Let's create a table in the database. Let's make sure it is the current database first with the it's the current database in use with the use keyword. Whoops. Run that, and now we see it is the current database in bold here. Now let's create a table for the database. We're going to use the keyword create. And again, but this time we're going to use table with it. Then we'll follow that with the name of the table. We'll start with actors. After the name of the table, you're going to include all your columns for the table inside of parentheses separated by columns, or I'm sorry, by commas, each column separated by commas. Each column will also need the data type and any other data design settings. So for example, our first column is going to be actor ID, and it's going to be, it will be our primary key, but we'll handle that in a minute, but it's going to have the data type of integer, and we're going to be requiring this, so we'll put not null there. And we also have it be an auto increment, or in other words, letting the system choose the value of the integer for us. The other two columns, remember separated by commas, are going to be the last name and the first name, and they're both going to be variable characters and also not null. Now remember, the numbers following the variable characters represent the maximum number of characters that we think we might need there. Goodness. Okay, lastly, we will make sure it knows which column will be the primary key. And we end the paren that started right here and end our statements. Okay, if we run that and refresh our schema list now, we'll see that we have one table in our database. And there's no data that's actually added to the table yet, but the structure has been created. So let's just look at that. Select everything from actors. You can see the column headers right there, but there's no data here. So let's go ahead and add some data into the table. Let's add some entities or actors. We will use the insert into keyword, followed by the name of the table, actors, and then the keyword values, followed by the data that you want to enter. We're going to be adding the actors Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. Each entity will be inside parentheses and separated by commas. And when you're typing out the insert with the syntax like this, you have to account for every column of the table. In other words, you need data inside your parentheses for every column. Look at the object information tab right here. This will help us get the order correct. So we'll start with parentheses. And first we have actor ID. Oops, put the value, not the name of the column, sorry. And since this is auto increment, we can put null here. We've set it up as auto increment, so we can let the system choose a number for us. We can put null or default in the place of actor ID value. Then comes the last name, which we see here in the object info, and the first name. Comma, next one. Okay, if I use the null, it's in the system's going to take whatever integer hasn't been used yet and assign it to the primary key. I used this one insert statement and added multiple actors. I could have added many, many more. I also could have just put the number 1 and the number 2 here, which is what you would do if you didn't have auto increment. You would just make sure they were always unique. And it would actually work this way, but since we've set it up to be auto increment, it makes more sense just to kind of let the system do it since we've done it that way. Let's go ahead and run this. And I'm going to select everything from actors again. And there we see we've got the 2 actors showing up now, and they got automatically assigned by the system 1 and 2. Now be careful not to run the inserts twice, and I'm going to show that here in just a minute. And so when you're doing the CUD commands, you don't really ever want to use this lightning bolt that will run everything. Be very careful that you're only running each insert statement one time. All right, let's look at adding an actress. This one is going to be Annie Potts. She's Bo Peep in Toy Story. This time, let's use the same syntax as before, but I just wanted to show it with default, which I like that option instead of null for that actor ID, and you'll see that it works just the same. So I'll just run another insert into actors values, and this time we'll see default, and then her last name and her first name. And I run that, and then select everything from actors, and there she is, number 3. Now, again, be careful not to run insert statements more than one time. If I run this again, so I'm going to run this same one I just did again, it's going to add and run everything from actors and a duplicate here. And I don't want that. So only run your insert statements one time. So we're going to have to delete this. There's a few ways you can do it. I'll just come in here, highlight it, and delete the rows. I do need to hit apply, and it does grab a delete statement for me, and I can run it, and then that should be gone. But be careful, you don't want to have some duplicates there. Okay, Let's look at an alternate way of adding another actress. This time we're going to include a column list before the keyword values. With this method of inserting data, you don't need to account for every single column. For example, if it was auto increment, or it had a default value set up, or it allowed for null values, you could actually leave it off. So in our example, we can completely leave off actor ID because we know it's auto incremented and the system will figure out the data for that column. Let's put Carrie Fisher of Star Wars in using the different syntax of the column names or the column list before the keyword values. So we're going to say insert into actors like we did before, but now we're going to go ahead and add that column list to our here before values. So we put the columns that we for sure need a value for. Those were not null. And values. Following the keyword values, we'll need to make sure we put the values in the exact order that we had them in the column list. The last name needs to go first and the first name last because that's the order that we had them in the column. We could change up the column order here and put first name first and last name last, but just make sure whatever you do that whatever follows the keyword values here is in the correct order of how you got it in the column list before the keyword values. All right, let's run that. And then we'll do select everything from actors. And now we have 4 actors in our table. Why didn't it assign number 4 for Carrie Fisher? How come it skipped 4? If you remember, I had a duplicate of Annie and she was number 4. And that the system actually remembers that even though we deleted her. So you've got to be careful with those auto incrementing. I could probably, let's just try it, go in here and see if it will let us manually change it. And run that again, make sure, okay. Just so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to have them 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 was still unique. It didn't matter. But for the rest of my examples here, I thought I would just change that back. So do be careful with running things twice. It kind of messes things up sometimes. All right, let's create a movies table. The table will be called movies with 5 columns. Movie, let's go ahead and just say create. So this is a new table, movies, and we're going to have 5 columns. Movie ID will be the primary key. It's integer, not null, and auto increment. And it will be the primary key. We're going to also have title. And this is a variable character. We will require this one. We're going to have, we need commas in between each column. We're going to have rating, which is an enum because there's only so many movie ratings. In fact, in ours, we're only going to have G, PG, and PG-13 as our only options that they can enter. We're going to have a release year. What year was the movie released? We can put a year data type there, and we'll require that one. And we'll have studio, variable character, and we'll have, make sure we know which one's going to be our primary key. Oops. and then end our program that started up here. And we'll go ahead and run that. I'm going to refresh my list here. And you'll see I've got now the movies table here. Notice we did not add not null after rating and studio. Therefore, the data is optional. It is not required as we're inserting the data. It can be left null. Okay, let's do select everything from the movies table. And we see here we have the structure of the table, but no data yet. See if you can insert a movie into this database, into this table on your own. You can use the column list before the values or not, whatever way you wanted to do that. Let me just give you the movie to add. So it's going to be Toy Story, and it's rated G, released in 1995 by Pixar. Okay, so there's the information you need. Pause the video if you want to figure it out on your own. You're going to be inserting data into a database for homework this weekend, so now's a good time to practice and see if you can get it on your own. All right, so let's look at some different ways you could have done this. So here is one way. First, you could have used the column, not used the column list like this. You would have had an account. In fact, let me just click on movies so you can see the object information here. Move this over just a tad. Okay, and you can see you would have needed to do it in this order. Movie ID, we knew it was auto increments, so you could have used default or number one or whatever you wanted to there. Then the title, and then the rating, the year, release year, and the studio in that order, if you'd use that syntax. If you used, you could have used a column list before the values keyword. And so you could have just skipped movie ID completely and just had the others in the same order: title, rating, release year, studio. So it has to match your column list. We could be even left off the rating and the studio completely because we had said that those could be null, and that would have worked well since they were not required. So this one would actually work, but then the rating and studio would have had a null value in them, but it would have let us do that. Okay, so I'm going to run, I'll actually run that one just to show you. Okay, so it ran. Let me show everything for movies, and you'll see it did add Toy Story in there, but it didn't give a rating or a studio because we allowed those to be null, and they show up null. Okay, I really want you to understand how to insert, since that's what you're going to be doing with your homework this weekend. And up to this point in this practice, we have really just been creating the C part of the CRUD acronym. We created a database, we created the structure of tables, we created or inserted data into our tables. Now let's look at the UD part of CRUD, the update and delete. If we realize, for example, that maybe we misspelled Tom Hanks' name, and we find out that he wants to go by Tommy, so we can update his or edit his first name in the database. We're going to use the keyword update. And then from what table are we updating it? That's the actors table. And then we're going to use the keyword set, followed by the column name and values that we're updating. So we know we want to change the column first name to be equal to Tommy. Now don't run this, and I want to tell you why. Because it's going to update every single first name in the whole table. It's going to go to the actors table, look for first names, all of them, and change them. So Tim, Annie, and Carrie would all have the first name of Tommy. This is definitely not what we want. So remember from your reading, you always want to use a where clause with updates and deletes because you can really mess up your data if you don't. So we are going to add a where clause, which will filter it or limit it down to just the one we want to update. We could say something like where last name is equal to Hanks. But there's a few problems with this. What if we had other actors with the last name Hanks? I know we don't, but we could have a really large database that did. Do we want to change all of their first names to Tommy? Also, know that by default, Workbench has a safe mode that's going to be on. It's checked here. And this means you can only update or delete using a primary key in the where clause. This is good because the primary key will always be unique and only one entity would get updated or deleted and not a whole number of them. So this is for your safety to keep the database secure. So if I try to run this, so depending on your safe mode preferences, this may or may not work. So I'm going to run it and I will get an error, whoops, down here that says my safe mode's on and it won't let me. So here's the best bet for updating only one actor or one entity. We're going to say where and use a primary key. Actor ID is equal to 1. So you'd have to know which primary key he has. And we don't need a quote mark there. Okay. I'm going to run that. And if I go back up here and select everything from actors, we'll see now that his first name says Tommy. All right, there is one more type of statement that I'm not really going to go over. It's called the alter statement. And this is used if you need to change the structure of a table after you've already created it. For example, if you need to add a column to a table that you realized later that you need, like now we need to keep track of their middle names or something. But alter statements are beyond the scope of this course, and we're not going to be going into alters in this class. Okay, let's go to the D part of the CRUD acronym, delete. To delete one of the actors from the table, you can run a delete statement. Let's see, let's come down here. After the keyword delete, you're going to specify which table you're deleting from. And so you're going to say delete from actors. Then just like update, you always need a where clause. Otherwise, if you run this right now, there would be no more entities in the table. It would be empty. The table and its structure would still be there, but it would be completely empty. So don't run it right here. You'll for sure want to have the where clause. And let's just stick to the same actor as we had before. Now we're deleting from the actors table where the actor ID is equal to 1. I run that and then go back up and run everything from actors. We see that Tom or Tommy Hanks is gone because we ran this. All right, if we want to drop the whole table, data, structure, and all from the database, we use the drop keyword. If we no longer need the actor table at all in our database, we can use this drop actors. So we can say drop table actors. Now we see over here that the actors table is completely gone. All right, in fact, let's see, if we go back up and try to do that, select everything from actors, we'll actually get an error message saying that that does not exist. All right, let's, if we want to delete the whole database, we can use a drop database and then the name of the database. Remember, we still have the movie table in there, so we should drop everything MDB. So now we're dropping the whole database called MDB. I run that, and we'll see in the list here, it is gone. So we no more database at all. So there we have some of the CUD part of the CRUD commands that are good to be aware of. Let's look and see how we're going to be getting an empty database ready for input for this week. Let's look at maybe a simple ERD here. So this represents what we've done with our actors and movies. It's important to see how you might insert data into a linking table. So that's what we're going to kind of look at here. So take a look at the actors and the movies tables here. What is the relationship of these two tables? It's many to many, right? Each actor can be in many movies, and each movie can have many different actors in it. So we know there's going to be a linking table here. So we saw how to insert the actors in the movies into a table. How do we insert data into the linking table? So it's going to pop up when I do a many-to-many. I'm going to call it cast, like movie cast. And of course, there's probably going to be lots more tables in a true database. But let's go ahead and forward engineer this like you're going to be doing this week. And we're going to go to the database, menu command, forward engineer. And we're going to click continue here. And we're going to check these two options. And it helps if you're going to be doing them, if you end up having to do it multiple times. So that's a good ones to check there. And then you might have to put in your password. I'm going to click continue here. And you're going to click here in a minute, but this is the code that's going to create the database. And this was created by Workbench from the ERD. We don't have to come up with our own create statements because it's already being done for us. And it's got a lot of information, especially look at this linking table. This is way more in depth than we're going to be getting in this class on our own, typing up on our own anyway. It's already done for us. Okay, so we're going to click continue to run that code and then click closed. Okay, so now if we go back to our list, you'll see if you refresh the list, you will see the new database in here with all three tables. I didn't have to create statements on my own. The structure of the database in each of the tables is done, but there is no data in any of these tables. So they have the same names as these other ones did. So I'll just show you really fast. We've got, I need to make sure I call it the same name. So there's just nothing in the tables. They just have a structure. They're empty. Okay, because we dropped our original database. All right, this is how you're going to be getting the database for your homework this week. So again, this is maybe what it would look like if you were going to start inserting actors and movies into this database. And that should look very familiar. We just went over all of that. Let me run them so it actually does it. Okay, so now I just added that to actors. We can see that adds them in, run the movies, show everything for movies, and show that they're all in there now. Okay, so we have Toy Story, Toy Story 3, and Star Wars as movies 1, 2, and 3. Notice I did use actual numbers For the actor and the movie primary keys, you don't have to use the auto increment numbers if you don't want to. And if you didn't use auto increment, you would have to use numbers anyway. All right, now what would it look like then to go to insert the information into that linking table? It would look something like this. These are just comments. You do not need any of this. But basically, it's just going to be a number and a number, a number and a number. Because if you look at the cast table over here in Workbench in the object information area, we know that actor ID was first and movie ID is second. So if you look at the first actor, Tom Hanks, let me just shorten these up so I can see a little more here. Okay, so if you look at actor ID, Tom Hanks, there's where 1 is, and he's in movie number 1, this one. So Tom Hanks in Toy Story. That's why I have comments there, just help me remember. There he is again, because he's also in Toy Story 3. Tim Allen, 2, is in Toy Story, and Tim Allen is also in Toy Story 3. 3 is Annie Potts, Bo Peep. She's in Toy Story, but she is not in Toy Story 3. So there's never going to be a 3,2 because she's not in that movie. Carrie Fisher is in Star Wars, Mark Hamill is in Star Wars, and Harrison Ford is in Star Wars. All right, you can use nested select statements in place of the numbers that will then result in those numbers, but that's a little beyond the scope of this practice. We're going to leave it this way for now for this practice. But just, I like to put the comments in just to kind of make those numbers make sense to me though. So there we have some CUD kind of create, update, delete statements that you might see as you're working through this week's information.